sick of seeing Navajo Lake. This thing goes from where we are all the way up into about 20 miles into New Mexico. So I'm guessing the lake must be 30 miles long, maybe more. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous lake for sure. And it's a great place to take a walk, especially on a sunny day like today. And I am grateful for that. And it's one of those things that's had me thinking during the pandemic. And I don't know, having a lot of time to just think is probably a bad thing in some regards. But I was thinking how grateful I am to so many people over the years, I think that everything that has happened to me that's been good in life, there's somebody that I owe a big debt of gratitude to. And the only thing that I don't owe people for are my failures. And in that case, maybe I owe some apologies for people that have been adversely affected by something I've done. But I had meant to do this years ago and happened to think about a guy that I used to work for. And his name is Burl Gilpin, and he was the city engineer in Grand Island, Nebraska. He was the electrical department engineer, the head of it. And I had been fired from a job, which when you're in sales, I was a sales manager, sales director, that, excuse me, that happens sometimes, right? And it was partially my fault, part of the fault of the guy that owned the company. He ended up hiring me back a couple years later. But anyway, I was in desperate need of a job. And Burl Gilpin hired me to be a power dispatcher for the city of Grand Island. And it was an hourly position. It was not salaried, but it paid very well. And we worked rotating shifts, so a lot of the weeks you got overtime depending on how the days shook out. But long story short, it was a fantastic job. So Burl hired me to be a power dispatcher. And what a power dispatcher did is we took phone calls for power emergencies, and we operated equipment, and we adjusted the settings for the 100 megawatt power plant to either produce less than we needed if we were buying power from outside, because sometimes it was cheaper, or to set it to push out more than we needed if we were selling power, which was quite often we did that. But anyway, it was a really great job for what it was. And one of the things that Burl had me do, he knew I was a computer guy, that I liked computers and had a little bit of a background in them. And so Burl asked me to work with some software he bought called RBase, which was a relational database programming language. So I learned RBase, and it turns out that relational database language is sort of standardized into structured query language, SQL. You've probably heard of it. Well, to this day, I still work with SQL and make money, make a bit of my living from it, even though I'm, quote unquote retired. But so it was a huge part of my future to get exposed to that, and just the fact that the guy hired me for that job. And then after 2 years, that other company hired me back to run a division of their company, and I quit. And I've always had a tinge of guilt over that. And I always thought, over the years, I need to call Burl and thank him for what he did for me. And so the other day, I called Burl, and oh my God, it was great to talk to him. He sounded the same, in good spirits. He's 10 or 15 years older than I am, and still in Grand Island, and just has that positive attitude that good people have. And so I told him exactly what I thought. And he told me, he said, but you quit, kidding, joking. And he told me that, he knew there was another guy there too, that he knew it just wasn't gonna fit us for the long term. And the other guy went on to manage another whole department of Grand Island. And so anyway, Burl, if you happen to see this, thanks again, buddy. It was a pleasure working for you, and I learned a lot, definitely. And in that, there is a bit of irony. But let me tell you the story first about while I worked there. There are things that stick in your head. If you have a severe thunderstorm, oh my God, all the alarms are going off all over the place and people are calling and it's crazy. But, that happened several times. But one thing that happened, and it's kind of a lesson in life that I learned long ago, and that was that the lineman called in one day and needed me to shut off a section of power, and basically you're tripping a circuit breaker in a remote substation somewhere. And so you've got all these panels. Nowadays I'm sure it's just all done on a computer screen, but you had all these panels. You'd walk over to the panel and you'd flip the breaker off, and then you'd put a tag on it so that nobody else would accidentally turn it on. And so I walked over, turned the breaker off, put the tag on it, got back to the seat, and those guys know how long it takes to do this. So he calls me on the radio and he says, "Hey, it's still humming. Did you turn off the right breaker?" So I went back, and sure enough, I had turned off the wrong friggin' breaker. So I had just shut off a section of Grand Island that didn't need to be turned off. So I quickly turned it back on, turned off the right breaker for him, talked to him on the radio, and sat down. And as I was sitting down, the phone rang. And it was the manager of a local supermarket in that section of town. And he was pissed. And I don't blame him. He was upset because there had been some other kind of normal breaker operation because of an electrical fault had shut their power off like the week before. And anytime their power would go off, it takes quite a while for everything to come back and the cash registers to work. And I mean, it's an ordeal for them and for their customers. So I don't blame the guy, man. He was upset. And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "I went to turn off the power for a line crew working on a section over in that area, and I'm sorry, I flipped the wrong breaker and turned your power off." And I said, I'm sorry. It was my mistake." And the guy went from being irate to being like, "Oh, okay, thank you for telling me the truth." And he hung up. I never heard another word about it. And I'm telling you, I've had things happen that, we couldn't control. And the mayor's calling, wondering why he's getting chewed out about the power being off or something. So, yeah, lesson learned. It's best just to own up and get it over with, I think, in those situations, right? Anyway, I owe lots of debts of gratitude to people. And if you happen to be one of them, thanks for everything you've done for me. We'll talk to you later.